Welcome to Tech with Kaushik. This is part 3 of our complete practice question series for the AZ-900 Microsoft Azure Fundamentals exam. Choose your answer before the timer ends. Then review the correct answer, detailed explanation, and exam tip. Let us begin part 3. Let's work through question number 75. This one focuses on Azure tags. Let's start with the scenario. A governance team uses Azure tags to improve resource organization and cost reporting. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement says, each Azure resource can have only one tag. The second statement says, tags can be assigned during deployment by using an Azure Resource Manager template. The third statement says, tags are network security controls that block unauthorized inbound traffic. Statement 1 should be marked no. A resource can have multiple tag name value pairs. Statement 2 should be marked yes. Tags can be declared as resource properties in an ARM template. Statement 3 should be marked no. Network security groups and other networking controls filter traffic. Tags are metadata. A helpful shortcut is this. Use tags for organization and cost reporting, not as security or authorization boundaries. Let's continue with question number 76. Here's the situation to consider. You encounter an unexpected provisioning failure while deploying a complex Azure virtual network environment and need technical assistance from Microsoft engineers. Where should you go to create an Azure technical support request natively? Now let's review the options. Choice A, the Azure portal. Choice B, the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Choice C, the Azure Pricing Calculator. Choice D, Microsoft Learn. In this case, choose option A. The Azure portal. The main reason is the Azure portal, portal.azure.com, includes a built-in Help Plus support blade. This is the primary native interface where administrators create, track, and manage technical support requests for Azure resources. Now let's rule out the other options. B. The Microsoft 365 Admin Center is for managing SaaS applications like Exchange Online and Teams, not Azure infrastructure. C. The pricing calculator estimates future costs before deployment. It provides no technical support capabilities. D. Microsoft Learn provides documentation and training, but you cannot open a direct technical support ticket with an engineer from there. The main takeaway is all Azure billing, quota, and technical support requests should be initiated directly through the Help Plus support section within the Azure portal. Question number 77. We are moving on to Azure Pricing Calculator. Scenario. A company is planning a new Azure deployment and wants to estimate costs before creating any resources. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1. The Azure Pricing Calculator can estimate expected Azure costs before deployment. Now check statement 2. The Azure Pricing Calculator analyzes the actual historical spending of deployed Azure subscriptions. Now check statement 3. The Azure Pricing Calculator lets you change service configurations, regions, and expected usage to compare estimates. For statement 1, choose yes. It creates cost estimates for planned Azure services and configurations. For statement 2, choose no. Actual subscription spending is analyzed with Microsoft Cost Management. For statement 3, choose yes. estimate inputs can be adjusted to compare deployment scenarios. Use the pricing calculator before deployment. Use cost management to analyze and control actual Azure spending. Let's take a look at question number 78. Take a moment to review this scenario. Your company subscribes to Microsoft 365 to provide employees with fully managed email, collaboration tools, and productivity applications accessible securely over the Internet. Microsoft 365 is a primary example of which cloud service model? Here are the possible answers. Option A is Software as a Service, SaaS. Option B is Platform as a Service, PaaS. Option C is Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS. Option D is Database as a Service, DBaaS. Go with option A, Software as a Service, SaaS. Software as a Service, SaaS, provides a complete software solution that you purchase on a pay-as-you-go basis from a cloud service provider. Microsoft 365 abstracts the underlying servers, operating systems, and application code, delivering only the finished productivity software to the end user. B. PaaS provides a framework for developers to build applications upon, like Azure App Service. Microsoft 365 is a finished application, not a developer platform. C. IaaS provides virtual machines and networking. You do not manage virtual machines when using Microsoft 365. D. DBaaS focuses purely on managed database engines, like Azure SQL database, not Office productivity software. Keep this point in mind for the exam. If the software is fully hosted, patched, and managed by the vendor, for example, Microsoft 365, Salesforce, Webmail, it is a SaaS product. Now let's examine question number 79. The focus now shifts to Azure Advisor. First, let's review the situation. A cloud administrator wants personalized recommendations for improving deployed Azure resources. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. Azure Advisor analyzes Azure resource configurations and usage to provide personalized recommendations. Statement 2. Azure Advisor recommendations can help improve cost, performance, reliability, and operational excellence. Statement 3. Azure Advisor automatically applies every recommendation without administrator approval. The first statement is yes. Advisor evaluates resource configuration and telemetry to identify optimization opportunities. The second statement is yes. These are core areas in which Advisor provides optimization guidance. The third statement is no. Advisor provides guidance, the customer decides whether and how to implement it. Here's a useful exam tip. Azure Advisor recommends improvements. Azure Monitor collects telemetry and generates alerts based on metrics and logs. Let's work through question number 80. First, let's review the situation. Your security team wants to implement a policy that requires multi-factor authentication, MFA, only when a user attempts to sign in from an unrecognized device or a location outside the corporate network. Which Microsoft Entra feature evaluates these sign-in signals to enforce dynamic access controls? Let's compare the available options. Choice A, Conditional Access. Choice B, Role-Based Access Control, RBAC. Choice C, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Choice D, Azure Policy. The right response is option A, Conditional Access. This works because Microsoft Entra Conditional Access is the tool used by Microsoft Entra ID to bring signals together, make decisions, and enforce organizational policies. It acts as an if-then engine. If a user is off the corporate network, then require MFA. Here's why the alternatives are not suitable. B. Azure RBAC controls what actions a user can perform on an Azure resource, like deleting a VM. It does not evaluate sign-in risk or enforce MFA. C. Defender for Cloud is a cloud security posture management tool. It does not act as an identity sign-in policy engine. D. Azure Policy evaluates resource configuration compliance, for example, ensuring all databases are encrypted. It does not evaluate user sign-in behavior. Exam tip. Conditional access is the if-then policy engine of Microsoft Entra ID, determining whether to allow, block, or require MFA for a sign-in attempt based on contextual signals. Next, question number 81. Next, let's move into Azure Cloud Shell. An IT support technician is learning about Azure administrative tools. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. Azure Cloud Shell requires a local agent before it can be used. Statement 2. The Azure CLI is included by default in every standard Windows 11 installation. Statement 3. Azure PowerShell can be installed and used on Windows, Linux, and macOS. The answer here is no. Cloud Shell is hosted in Azure and accessed through a browser. The answer here is no. The Azure CLI is a separate Azure management tool that must be installed or accessed through Cloud Shell. The answer here is yes. PowerShell and the Azure PowerShell as module support all three operating system families. A helpful shortcut is this. Cloud Shell requires no local installation. Locally installed Azure CLI and Azure PowerShell are cross-platform tools. Here comes question number 82. Here's what is happening. An administrator is evaluating Azure Resource Manager as the management layer for Azure resources. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1. Azure Resource Manager provides a consistent management layer that can be used through the Azure portal, Azure CLI, Azure PowerShell, and REST APIs. Now check statement 2. ARM templates use declarative syntax to support consistent and repeatable resource deployments. Now check statement 3. A single Azure resource can belong to multiple resource groups at the same time. The first statement is yes. Resource Manager provides a common management layer across these interfaces. The second statement is yes. An ARM template declares the desired Azure resources and can be reused for repeatable deployments. The third statement is no. An Azure resource can belong to only one resource group at a time. The main takeaway is Azure Resource Manager is the management layer. ARM templates are declarative files used for repeatable infrastructure as code deployments. Question number 83 brings in a useful concept. The key situation is this. You are traveling and only have an Android tablet with a web browser. You receive an emergency alert that an Azure virtual machine must be restarted immediately. Which three methods can you use from your tablet to securely access and restart the virtual machine? You need to identify three correct options. Watch the differences between these options. Option A. The Azure portal. Option B. Bash in Azure Cloud Shell. Option C. PowerShell in Azure Cloud Shell. Option D. Azure Advisor. Option E. Microsoft Purview. You should choose option A. The Azure Portal, option B. Bash in Azure Cloud Shell, and option C. PowerShell in Azure Cloud Shell. This is the best choice because the Azure Portal and Azure Cloud Shell, which supports both Bash and PowerShell, are fully accessible via any modern web browser, allowing administrators to manage resources from mobile devices and tablets without installing local software. The other choices do not work because the Azure Advisor provides optimization recommendations. It is not an interactive terminal or interface used to restart virtual machines. E. Microsoft Purview is a data governance and compliance service completely unrelated to restarting virtual machines. Azure Cloud Shell provides a pre-authenticated browser-based terminal, Bash and PowerShell, that can be accessed from any operating system, including mobile devices. Let's focus on question number 84. Let's focus on the following scenario. A cloud administrator is implementing a governance strategy to prevent the accidental deletion of critical infrastructure. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement says, you can apply an Azure resource lock to an individual user account in Microsoft Entra ID. The second statement says, a single Azure virtual machine can have multiple resource locks applied to it simultaneously. The third statement says, an administrator can modify the properties of an Azure virtual machine that has a cannot delete lock applied. For statement 1, choose no. Resource locks apply to Azure resources, resource groups, and subscriptions. They cannot be applied to identity objects in Microsoft Entra ID. For statement 2, choose yes. You can apply multiple locks to a single resource. The most restrictive lock always takes precedence. For statement 3, choose yes. A cannot delete lock explicitly allows administrators to read and modify a resource. It only prevents deletion. Keep this point in mind for the exam. A delete lock prevents deletion but allows modification. A read-only lock prevents both deletion and modification. Let's continue with question number 85. Let's start with the scenario. Your organization wants to protect all the resources deployed for a specific project from being accidentally deleted. To which of the following scopes can you directly apply an Azure resource lock? Take a look at each choice. Option A is an Azure subscription. Option B is an Azure policy definition. Option C is a Microsoft Entra administrative unit. Option D is a Microsoft Entra user account. The best choice is option A, an Azure subscription. Let's look at the reasoning. Resource locks can be applied at 3 specific levels in the Azure hierarchy: the subscription level, the resource group level, or the individual resource level. Applying a lock at the subscription level inherits down to all resources within it. The remaining options can be eliminated because B, an Azure policy definition, is a rule that evaluates compliance. It is not a container or resource scope that receives a lock. C, a Microsoft Entra administrative unit, is used to organize identity objects for delegated administration, not Azure infrastructure resources. D, user accounts are identity constructs in Microsoft Entra ID, not infrastructure resources managed by Azure Resource Manager. Here's a useful exam tip. Resource locks are strictly for infrastructure governance. They can only be applied to subscriptions, resource groups, and resources. Now for question number 86. This question takes us into Azure portal. Here's the scenario. A junior administrator is familiarizing themselves with the various management blades in the Azure portal to monitor the environment. Match the Azure portal task to the appropriate service blade. First, review these entries. Left item 1, view personalized security recommendations for your deployed resources. Left item 2, view global health advisories and planned maintenance affecting your resources. Now look at the choices on the right. Right option A, Azure Advisor. Right option B, Azure Service Health. Right option C, Azure Marketplace. Let's review the completed pairs. View personalized security recommendations for your deployed resources goes with A, Azure Advisor. View global health advisories and planned maintenance affecting your resources goes with B, Azure Service Health. Here's why. Azure Advisor provides optimization recommendations across multiple categories, including security. Azure Service Health provides personalized alerts regarding platform outages and maintenance. Exam tip. Advisor tells you what you should fix to improve your environment. Service Health tells you what Microsoft is fixing that might affect your environment. Question number 87. Let's go. A development team is migrating various application workloads to Azure and must select the appropriate Azure offerings. Match the Azure service to its correct architectural description. The left column contains left side choice 1, provides a platform for executing event-driven serverless code. Left side choice 2 provides a fully managed platform for hosting web applications. Left side choice 3 provides application performance monitoring and anomaly detection for web apps. Here are the possible matches. Right side choice A, Azure Functions. Right side choice B, Azure App Service. Right side choice C, Application Insights. The matches work out like this. The correct match for provides a platform for executing event-driven serverless code is A, Azure Functions. The correct match for provides a fully managed platform for hosting web applications is B, Azure App Service. The correct match for provides application performance monitoring and anomaly detection for web apps is C, Application Insights. The main reason is Azure Functions is a serverless compute service. Azure App Service is an HTTP-based service for hosting web applications. Application Insights is an APM service for developers to monitor live applications. A helpful shortcut is this. When you need to run small pieces of code, functions, in response to events without worrying about underlying infrastructure, choose Azure Functions. Let's take a look at question number 88. Take a moment to review this scenario. You have an Azure resource group named Production RG. You need to ensure that users cannot delete the resource group, nor can they modify or delete any of the resources contained within it, even if they have owner permissions. Which action should you take? Here are the possible answers. Option A is apply a read-only lock to Production RG. Option B is apply a cannot delete lock to Production RG. Option C is assign a restrictive Azure policy to Production RG. Option D is remove all RBAC role assignments from Production RG. The answer here is option A, apply a read-only lock to Production RG. A read-only lock restricts all users from modifying or deleting the resource, effectively making it static. Applying this lock to the resource group ensures that it and all its inherited child resources cannot be changed or deleted. Let's quickly check the incorrect choices. B. A cannot delete lock prevents deletion, but still allows users to modify the resources, which violates the requirement to prevent modifications. C. Azure policy is used to evaluate compliance and enforce deployment standards, not to explicitly lock existing resources against all modifications. D. Removing all RBAC assignments would completely block legitimate read access for administrators who need to view the resources. The main takeaway is resource locks override RBAC. Even a user with the owner role cannot modify a resource if a read-only lock is applied to it. Next up is question number 89. We are moving on to Azure regions. You are preparing an automated deployment script using Azure CLI to provision several virtual machines and storage accounts. When deploying most Azure resources, what geographic parameter must you specify to determine where the physical data will reside? Review the options. Option A. An Azure region. Option B. An Azure data center. Option C. An availability zone. Option D. A sovereign cloud. Go with option A. An Azure region. This works because when provisioning resources in Azure, you must select the Azure region, for example, East US, West Europe, where the resource will be deployed. This ensures data residency and compliance by controlling the broad geographic location of your data. Now let's rule out the other options. B. You cannot deploy a resource to a specific data center. Azure abstracts data centers into regions and availability zones. C. While you can optionally select an availability zone for supported services, the primary mandatory location parameter for a resource is always the region. D. A sovereign cloud is an entirely separate instance of Azure, like Azure Government, not a geographic parameter you select during standard resource creation. Regions are the fundamental geographic building blocks in Azure. You always deploy resources to a region, never directly to a specific physical data center. Next, question number 90. Scenario. A cloud architecture team is designing an autoscaling strategy for a high-traffic web application. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. Horizontal scaling can automatically add more virtual machine instances to a workload as application demand increases. Statement 2. Vertical scaling automatically allocates additional CPU and memory to an Azure virtual machine without requiring a restart. Statement 3. Implementing autoscaling can help optimize cloud costs by reducing compute resources during periods of low demand. Statement 1 should be marked yes. This is known as scaling out, and it is natively supported by features like virtual machine scale sets. Statement 2 should be marked no. Changing the size of an Azure virtual machine, vertical scaling up, typically requires the VM to be restarted to apply the new hardware profile. Statement 3 should be marked yes. Scaling in, removing instances, when traffic drops ensures you only pay for the compute resources you actually need. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Horizontal scaling, scaling out in, adds or removes identical virtual machines. Vertical scaling, scaling up down, changes the size power of a single VM. Question number 91. Next, let's move into Microsoft Purview. Consider this situation. A chief data officer is evaluating Microsoft Purview to improve data governance and compliance across the enterprise. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement says, Microsoft Purview provides automated disaster recovery backups for Azure virtual machines. The second statement says, Microsoft Purview provides data discovery capabilities across on-premises, multi-cloud, and SaaS environments. The third statement says, Microsoft Purview provides automated data classification to identify sensitive information such as credit card numbers. The answer here is no. Azure Backup and Azure Site Recovery provide backup and disaster recovery, not Microsoft Purview. The answer here is yes. Purview can scan and map data residing in Azure, AWS, on-premises SQL servers, and Microsoft 365. The answer here is yes. Purview uses built-in and custom classifiers to automatically tag and label sensitive data during its scans. Here's a useful exam tip. Whenever a scenario asks about mapping the data landscape, discovering sensitive data, or unified data governance, the answer is Microsoft Purview. Take a careful look at question number 92. Pay close attention to what the scenario really requires. Your organization has a virtual network in East US under the HR subscription and another virtual network in West Europe under the finance subscription. The networks use non-overlapping IP address spaces, and you need direct private communication between their virtual machines. Can virtual network peering be used to connect these networks? Use the details in the question to eliminate options. Next, option A, yes, global virtual network peering can connect the networks across regions and subscriptions. Next, option B, no, virtual network peering can connect networks only within the same Azure region. Next, option C, no, virtual network peering can connect networks only within the same Azure subscription. Next, option D, no, virtual network peering can connect networks only within the same resource group. In this case, choose option A, yes, global virtual network peering can connect the networks across regions and subscriptions. This is the best choice because Azure supports global virtual network peering across Azure regions, and peering can also span subscriptions. The scenario specifies non-overlapping address spaces, which are required for peering. B. Global virtual network peering supports different Azure regions. C. Peering can be configured across subscriptions when the required permissions are available. D. Resource group boundaries do not prevent virtual network peering. Exam tip. Azure virtual networks can be peered across regions and subscriptions, but their address spaces must not overlap. Question number 93. Let's go. A network architect is selecting connectivity and hosting solutions for a hybrid cloud deployment. Match the Azure service to its correct architectural description. Here are the items on the left. Item 1 on the left is a dedicated private connection to Azure that does not travel over the public internet. Item 2 on the left uses an encrypted tunnel over the public internet to connect on-premises networks to Azure. Item 3 on the left provides a cloud-hosted Windows environment for remote users. Choose from these right-side options. Choice A on the right is Azure Express Route. Choice B on the right is Azure VPN Gateway. Choice C on the right is Azure Virtual Desktop. Here are the correct matches. Match a dedicated private connection to Azure that does not travel over the public internet with A. Azure Express Route. Match uses an encrypted tunnel over the public internet to connect on-premises networks to Azure with B. Azure VPN Gateway. Match provides a cloud-hosted Windows environment for remote users with C Azure Virtual Desktop. Let's look at the reasoning. ExpressRoute provides private, dedicated hybrid connectivity. VPN Gateway provides encrypted internet-based hybrid connectivity. Azure Virtual Desktop provides cloud-hosted user workstations. A helpful shortcut is this. A VPN uses the public internet and is encrypted. ExpressRoute is private, faster, and more reliable because it bypasses the public internet entirely. Now let's examine question number 94. Here's the situation to consider. A development team requires administrative, root access to the underlying operating system to install custom drivers and a proprietary web server before deploying their application. Which cloud service model provides the customer with the ability and responsibility to manage the guest operating system? Take a look at each choice. Choice A, Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS, only. Choice B, Platform as a Service, PaaS, only. Choice C, Software as a Service, SaaS, only. Choice D, both IaaS and PaaS. The answer here is option A, Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS, only. Here's why. In an Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS, model, the cloud provider manages the physical hardware and hypervisor, but the customer retains complete control over the guest operating system, including the ability to install drivers and manage patches. Here's why the alternatives are not suitable. B. In a PaaS model, the cloud provider abstracts and manages the operating system. The customer only manages the application code and data. C. In a SaaS model, the cloud provider manages the entire stack, including the application software itself. D. PaaS does not allow OS-level access, so it cannot be both. The main takeaway is if a scenario requires you to patch the operating system, install custom OS-level drivers, or RDP SSH into the host, you must use IaaS, virtual machines. Question number 95. This question takes us into Azure DNS. A network administrator is evaluating Azure DNS for hosting both the company's external public website records and their internal server names. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1. Azure DNS can only host public domains and cannot resolve names on a private internal virtual network. Now check statement 2. Azure virtual machines can be configured to register their host names automatically with Azure private DNS. Now check statement 3. You can host a custom vanity domain name, such as contoso.com, using Azure DNS. For statement 1, choose no. Azure Private DNS provides a reliable and secure DNS service to manage and resolve domain names within an Azure virtual network. For statement 2, choose yes. When you link a virtual network to a private DNS zone with auto-registration enabled, Azure automatically registers VM hostnames. For statement 3, choose yes. You can delegate your public custom domain from your registrar to Azure DNS to manage its records natively in Azure. Azure DNS supports public DNS zones for internet-facing records and private DNS zones for internal VNet resolution. Question number 96. Scenario. A data architect is designing a lifecycle policy for block blobs in a general-purpose V2 storage account. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1. The hot access tier requires data to be stored for a minimum of 30 days to avoid early deletion fees. Now check statement 2. The cool access tier is optimized for storing data that is accessed infrequently and retained for at least 30 days. Now check statement 3. The archive access tier is optimized for data that can tolerate retrieval delays and is stored for at least 180 days. Statement 1 should be marked no. The hot tier has no minimum retention requirement. You can delete data immediately without penalty. Statement 2 should be marked yes. In a general-purpose V2 account, cool tier blobs have a 30-day minimum retention period for early deletion billing. Statement 3 should be marked yes. Archive is the cheapest tier per gigabytes but requires rehydration, which takes hours, and penalizes deletion before 180 days. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Remember the minimum retention rules. Hot is equal to 0 days, cool is equal to 30 days, archive is equal to 180 days. Question number 97. Needs a little extra thought. Look for the most important clue in this scenario. You have been tasked with reducing the monthly operational costs of your existing Azure environment without severely impacting performance. Which Azure service analyzes your deployed resources and provides personalized, automated recommendations to help you reduce cloud spending? See which choices you can rule out. Consider option A, Azure Advisor. Consider option B, Azure Service Health. Consider option C, Application Insights. Consider option D, Azure Monitor Logs. The right response is option A, Azure Advisor. The main reason is Azure Advisor analyzes your resource configuration and usage telemetry and then recommends solutions that can help you improve the cost effectiveness, performance, reliability, and security of your Azure resources. The other choices do not work because B, Azure Service Health alerts you to platform outages and planned maintenance, not cost-saving optimizations. C, Application Insights monitors live web application performance and exceptions. It does not analyze billing or infrastructure costs. D, Azure Monitor Logs collects telemetry data for querying. It does not automatically generate personalized cost recommendations. Here's a useful exam tip. When you see a requirement for personalized recommendations across cost, security, or performance, Azure Advisor is the correct tool. Now for question number 98. The focus now shifts to resource hierarchy. Here's the scenario. A cloud administrator is designing the governance structure for a new enterprise Azure tenant. They need to understand how policies and permissions flow downward through the environment. Order the Azure organizational scopes from the highest level, broadest scope, to the lowest level, narrowest scope. Build the sequence from these choices. The first available item is Management Group. The second available item is Azure Subscription. The third available item is Resource Group. The fourth available item is Azure Virtual Machine. Use this order. At position 1, Management Group. At position 2, Azure Subscription. At position 3, Resource Group. At position 4, Azure Virtual Machine. The Azure resource hierarchy dictates how RBAC permissions and policies are inherited. Management groups sit at the top and can contain multiple subscriptions. Subscriptions contain resource groups. Resource groups contain individual resources, like virtual machines. Exam tip. Permissions and policies flow downward. A policy applied to a management group will inherit down to all subscriptions, resource groups, and resources beneath it. Here comes question number 99. Here's what is happening. An administrator is applying resource locks to critical Azure components to prevent accidental downtime. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement says, a read-only lock prevents authorized administrators from deleting an Azure resource. The second statement says, an administrator can modify the configuration of an Azure resource that has a cannot delete lock applied. The third statement says, resources automatically inherit resource locks applied to their parent resource group or subscription. The first statement is yes. A read-only lock prevents any modifications or deletions, effectively making the resource completely static. The second statement is yes. A cannot delete lock explicitly permits read and write actions, it only blocks the deletion action. The third statement is yes. If you lock a resource group, all resources inside that group inherit the lock. A helpful shortcut is this. The most restrictive lock takes precedence. If a parent has a read-only lock and a child has a cannot delete lock, the child is treated as read-only. Let's continue with question number 100. The focus now shifts to storage redundancy. First, let's review the situation. An organization uses GeoZone Redundant Storage, GZRS, to protect its Azure storage data against availability zone and regional failures. How many total copies of the data are maintained across the primary and secondary Azure regions? Now let's review the options. Choice A, 2. Choice B, 3. Choice C, 6. Choice D, 12. The best choice is option C, 6. This works because GZRS maintains 3 copies across availability zones in the primary region using zone redundant storage and 3 additional copies in the secondary region using locally redundant storage. Therefore, 6 copies are maintained across the 2 regions. The remaining options can be eliminated because A. 2 copies do not provide the zone-level and regional redundancy used by GZRS. B. 3 copies describe redundancy within one region, not the total across both regions. D. GZRS does not maintain 12 copies under the standard Azure storage replication model. The main takeaway is GZRS combines ZRS in the primary region with LRS replication in a secondary region, 3 primary copies plus 3 secondary copies. Next up is question number 101. Consider this situation. An organization is comparing authentication methods available through Microsoft Entra ID. Match each authentication method to its defining characteristic. Let's begin with the left side. Left item 1, password authentication. Left item 2, passwordless authentication. Left item 3, multi-factor authentication, MFA. The right column contains. Right side choice A uses a secret that the user knows. Right side choice B uses methods such as Windows Hello or Fido to without requiring a password. Right side choice C requires 2 or more verification factors. Use these pairings. Pair password authentication and A uses a secret that the user knows. Pair passwordless authentication and B uses methods such as Windows Hello or Fido to without requiring a password. Pair multi-factor authentication, MFA, and C requires 2 or more verification factors. This is the best choice because passwords are knowledge factors. Passwordless methods use alternatives such as biometrics, device-bound credentials, or security keys. MFA combines at least 2 verification factors. MFA combines multiple factors. Passwordless authentication replaces the password with methods such as Windows Hello or FIDO2. Now let's examine question number 102. Here's the situation to consider. You are reviewing charges for block blobs stored in a general-purpose V2 storage account. Which access tier can incur an early deletion charge when a blob is deleted before 30 days have elapsed? Let's compare the available options. Option A is the cool access tier. Option B is the hot access tier. Option C is Azure SQL database. Option D is Azure Cosmos DB. The best choice is option A, the cool access tier. Let's look at the reasoning. In a general-purpose V2 storage account, a blob in the cool tier is subject to a prorated early deletion charge if it is deleted, overwritten, or moved to another tier before 30 days have elapsed. Let's quickly check the incorrect choices. B. The hot tier has no minimum retention period. C. Azure SQL database is a relational database service and does not use blob storage access tiers. D. Azure Cosmos DB is a NoSQL database service and does not use blob storage access tiers. Keep this point in mind for the exam. For general-purpose V2 accounts, remember hot is equal to no minimum, cool is equal to 30 days, cold is equal to 90 days, and archive is equal to 180 days. Here's an important one. Question number 103. This situation sets up the main requirement. A consulting firm is helping a client classify their upcoming cloud deployments according to the shared responsibility model. Match the cloud service model to its appropriate architectural description. The left column contains left side choice 1 provides the highest level of administrative control over the underlying infrastructure and guest operating system. Left side choice 2 provides a platform for hosting databases and web apps without the need to manage the underlying operating system. Left side choice 3 delivers a fully managed, complete software application directly to end users. Here are the possible matches. Right option A, Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS. Right option B, Platform as a Service, PaaS. Right option C, Software as a Service, SaaS. Use these pairings. The correct match for provides the highest level of administrative control over the underlying infrastructure and guest operating system is A. Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS. The correct match for provides a platform for hosting databases and web apps without the need to manage the underlying operating system is B. Platform as a Service, PaaS. The correct match for delivers a fully managed, complete software application directly to end users is C. Software as a Service, SaaS. Here's why. IaaS provides bare metal or virtualized hardware. PaaS abstracts the OS and provides a runtime environment. SaaS provides the finished application. Here's a useful exam tip. If you manage the OS, it's IaaS. If you only manage your app code and data, it's PaaS. If you just consume the app, it's SaaS. Now for question number 104. Consider this situation. Your finance department has noticed a steady increase in Azure expenditures. They want you to identify underutilized resources and apply automated best practices to lower the monthly bill. Which Azure tool should you consult to review automated recommendations for downsizing virtual machines to reduce costs? The choices are: Choice A, Azure Advisor. Choice B, Azure Pricing Calculator. Choice C, Azure Service Health. Choice D, Azure Log Analytics. Go with option A, Azure Advisor. The main reason is Azure Advisor analyzes your deployed Azure resources and usage data to provide personalized, actionable recommendations for optimizing your deployments, including specific recommendations to save money by resizing or shutting down idle resources. Now let's rule out the other options. B. The Azure Pricing Calculator is used to estimate the cost of future deployments before they are created. It does not analyze existing resources. C. Azure Service Health alerts you to regional platform outages and maintenance, not cost optimization. D. Log Analytics is a workspace for querying collected telemetry data. It does not natively generate best practice cost recommendations. Exam tip. Whenever a scenario asks for personalized recommendations across cost, security, reliability, performance, or operational excellence, choose Azure Advisor. Here comes question number 105. We are moving on to IaaS concepts. Your organization is migrating a legacy application that requires custom registry modifications on the host server. Which Azure resource is a primary example of infrastructure as a service, IaaS, that allows this level of control? Here are the options. Option A. An Azure virtual machine. Option B. An Azure SQL database. Option C. An Azure web app. Option D. Microsoft 365. In this case, choose option A. An Azure virtual machine. An Azure virtual machine is a fundamental IaaS offering. It provides you with a virtualized computer where you have complete administrative access to the guest operating system, allowing custom configurations like registry edits. B. An Azure SQL database is a platform as a service, PaaS, offering. The underlying OS is abstracted and managed by Microsoft. C. An Azure web app service, is a PaaS offering for hosting websites without managing the web servers or OS. D. Microsoft 365 is a software as a service, SaaS, offering. Everything from the infrastructure to the application software is managed by Microsoft. A helpful shortcut is this. Virtual machines and virtual machine scale sets are the primary examples of IaaS compute in Azure. Let's work through question number 106. Let's start with the scenario. Your company hosts resources for multiple departments in a single shared Azure subscription. The finance team needs a way to filter the monthly invoice so they can charge each department accurately for their specific consumption. Which Azure feature allows you to apply logical metadata labels to resources so you can group them for consolidated departmental billing reports? Here are the possible answers. Option A is resource tags. Option B is Azure policy. Option C is Azure service health. Option D is management groups. The answer here is option A, resource tags. This works because tags are name value pairs that enable you to categorize resources for billing and management. By applying a tag like department, marketing to resources, you can easily filter Azure cost management reports by that tag. Here's why the alternatives are not suitable. B. Azure policy evaluates resources to ensure they comply with corporate rules. While a policy can enforce the use of tags, the tags themselves are what enable the billing categorization. C. Azure Service Health tracks platform outages and maintenance, completely unrelated to billing metadata. D. Management groups organize subscriptions hierarchically for governance, but they do not apply metadata labels to individual resources for line item billing. The main takeaway is tags are essential for detailed chargeback reporting, billing categorization, and logical organization of resources. Question number 107. Next, let's move into cost management. Here's the scenario. You are auditing an Azure subscription to identify unused resources that are generating unnecessary ongoing monthly charges. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. Deleting unused user accounts in Microsoft Entra ID will reduce Azure monthly consumption costs. Statement 2. Deleting unused standard public IP address resources will reduce Azure consumption costs. Statement 3. Deleting unattached managed disks will reduce Azure monthly consumption costs. The answer here is no. Storing basic user accounts and security groups in Microsoft Entra ID does not incur direct consumption charges. The answer here is yes. Standard public IP addresses use static allocation and remain billable until the public IP resource is deleted. The answer here is yes. Managed disks incur monthly storage charges based on their provisioned size, even if the VM they were attached to has been deleted. To save money, ensure you clean up orphaned resources like unattached managed disks and unused public IP addresses. See how you handle question number 108. Before choosing, identify the key constraint. A development team is evaluating serverless computing for event-driven workloads. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1. Azure functions can run code in response to events without requiring the customer to manage the underlying servers. Now check statement 2. A serverless solution requires the customer to provision and patch virtual machines before the application can run. Now check statement 3. Serverless services can scale execution based on demand and can use consumption-based billing. For statement 1, choose yes. Azure Functions is a serverless compute service that abstracts server management. For statement 2, choose no. The cloud provider manages the underlying servers and operating system maintenance. For statement 3, choose yes. Serverless services can allocate resources as events arrive and charge according to execution or consumed resources. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Serverless means you focus on application code and events while the provider manages the underlying infrastructure. Let's take a look at question number 109. This is marked as an easy question. Take a moment to review this scenario. Your team wants to deploy the same Azure infrastructure consistently across development, test, and production environments by using a declarative JSON file. Which Azure feature should the team use? Now let's review the options. Choice A. An Azure Resource Manager template. Choice B. Azure Advisor. Choice C. Azure Service Health. Choice D. Azure DNS. The right response is option A. An Azure Resource Manager template. This is the best choice because an Azure Resource Manager template is a declarative JSON file that defines Azure resources and their properties. It can be reused to deploy infrastructure consistently across environments. The other choices do not work because B. Azure Advisor provides optimization recommendations for existing Azure resources. C. Azure Service Health reports service issues and planned maintenance that may affect resources. D. Azure DNS hosts DNS zones and resolves domain names. Here's a useful exam tip. Infrastructure as code defines infrastructure declaratively so deployments can be repeated consistently and version. You have completed part 3 of the AZ-900 practice question series. Continue your preparation by opening the complete playlist and watching the remaining parts in sequence. Please like this video, subscribe to Tech with Kaushik, and enable notifications for more cloud certification exam preparation content. Share your score, questions, or feedback in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you in the next part.